Hello, and welcome to my music channel, Touchstone Music. For a while now, I've wanted to do a series of reviews on albums from the 1960s, pop albums that I bought when they were new. I would like to do a kind of a comparison of what I remember of how they impacted me then, the kind of influence they had on me, and how I feel about them today, and how all through that period of 50 years or so, they have acted as touchstones in my life. I've gone back to them to listen to them over and over for enjoyment, for inspiration, and for learning new things as I get more musically evolved. So I see more things in these records and this music than I did before. I really do believe that the 50s and 60s in particular and beyond, including up to today, we are living in and have lived through a sort of pop music renaissance, whereby the music just exploded away from. I'll do a video on this sometime and unpack this more. But I really think we have been very fortunate, not only in, of course, the fact that music is now recorded and we can save it forever. You don't have to be there to enjoy the musical event later, but also because of the way music has evolved and changed and I think become better, so that now all of us are lucky enough that we can really delve into whatever our musical tastes are, and there will be a library of it somewhere for us to enjoy. Now, before I get started on this, this video is just going to be like an introductory. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself to give you an idea of sort of where I'm coming from this, the lens that I'm seeing this through. And before I do that, I have a couple of disclaimers. Number one, these are my views and opinions based on my experience thus far and are subject to change as I gain new information and insight. So before I begin to do my first review, which will be the subject of my next video, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about myself. Again, what I'm hoping to do in these videos is, as I said, the hook will be, okay, what do I remember about how they impacted me and the times that I bought them? How have they acted as sort of touchstones in my life, musical touchstones since then? And what do I think of them today? And the review will be based on my current understanding and view of music. The first memory that I have of being aware of music as a thing, we'd have to go way back to the 50s somewhere. I'm guessing it would be about 1955, which would make me about 7 at the time, because most of my teenage years I was in the 60s. I'll paint a little mental picture for you here. It's a hot summer's morning. My dad and I are parked by the curb waiting for my mother, who has gone into a store to do some shopping. So this is 1955. I'm guessing this would be Dad's 55 black Mercury sedan. The windows are all open because we had no AC. The radio is on, but it's an AM radio because FM, I don't think cars had an FM radio yet. At least ours didn't. My dad's having a cigarette. I'm sitting in the front seat next to him. This is really cool because Mom's in the store, and so I'm feeling like, chilling with my dad. And I swear, Hank Williams comes on the box and does I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. And I remember thinking at the time, I have a very clear memory of thinking, I really like that music. My dad was a big country music fan, so it could well have been a country station we were listening to, or it might have been one of the newer pop stations that were springing up, whereby they would play everything, every style of music. So Hank Williams might be followed by Elvis, might be followed by Fats Domino, might be followed by the Platters, maybe Patsy Cline, and it would go on and on like that. Little Richard. And meanwhile, you'd have this modern hip DJ giving this modern hip sort of DJ rap. So fast forward a year or two, my older sister, who at that time would be just about a teenager, would come home from school with her friends. They would bring the latest records over to dance to in the living room of our rent-controlled townhouse. I swear we're the poorest people in the neighborhood at that time, and yet for some reason all the kids seemed to congregate at our place. I don't know why that was. And they'd have what they call a sock hop in those days. Remember, this is the middle of the 50s, 56, let's say, 57 maybe. Yeah, 57, I'd say. And it was the music that drew me. I mean, I know I get it. I was the annoying little brother. I'm sure my sister would have rathered I melted through the floor. She thought I was hanging around because either I wanted to learn how to dance or I wanted to hang around with the cool kids. I swear it was the music that was drawing me. And so they'd play Elvis, they'd play Little Richard, they'd play Fats Domino, they'd play Richie Valli, and so on. And funnily enough, the other day I was going through some old LPs, vinyl LPs that I have inherited from the family. Um, and I found this. See if I can get this in frame here. This is Little Richard's first record called Here's Little Richard. Not only is this the album they were listening to, this is the physical record they were playing at the time, which somehow I managed to inherit. This is an amazing record. Personally, I think, and I know everyone thinks Elvis was the king of rock and roll. Certainly, he was an amazing performer. Love Elvis. But I think Little Richard was the king of rock and roll, quite frankly, and I think even Elvis would have agreed with you. His debut album has practically every one of his hits on it, which is another thing, except I'm thinking maybe Lucille, Girl Can't Help It. I can't think of too many others that aren't on here. But it's got Tutti Frutti, Too Fine Mama, Can't Believe You Want to Leave, Long Tall Sally, my personal favorite, Miss Anne, and so on and so on. Amazing, amazing album. So, carry forward a little further. I'm myself heading towards being a teenager at that point, and from the money I make from my paper route and whatever, I buy the odd 45 single record from something I hear on the radio that I like. I start to sort of have my own minor little music collection, and I notice a pattern in there for me, and the pattern is this. I was drawn to bands that played guitar music. Now, in the late 50s, early 60s, there were a number of bands that were doing a lot of instrumentals. There were bands like the Ventures, Link Ray and the Raymond. There was a band that kind of off the beaten path there called Santo and Johnny. They did sort of Hawaiian guitar music, but they were fantastic also. Anyway, I was sort of drawn to those, and I'd hear them on the radio, and then I'd buy the 45 or whatever. And then 63, 64 arrives. By this time, I'm, middle teen years, and the Beatles arrive. And I became an instant big fan of the Beatles. I bought their second album, and then I was quickly informed by my cousin, who told me that I'd bought the wrong album. Their first album was much better. So somehow I scraped together the money and got that. And then after that, I'd buy each subsequent albums as they came out, and which would be, like once a year at least. Now, by about 65, however, they were already being embraced by the establishment. And if you wanted to be a little edgy, as you got a little older, in your teenage years and a bit rebellious, you started to listen to another band from England called the Rolling Stones. and so I very daringly started to listen to them a little bit. And then 1967, I graduated from high school and went to university. And in university, I fell in with a new crowd, and I quickly found out that these people were hardcore, what was then underground music fans. So I went from the edgiest thing I was listening to being, as I said, the Rolling Stones, to things like Country Joe and the Fish, Big Brother and the Holding Company with Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, the Moby Grape, and on mostly the West Coast psychedelia bands. And so for the fall and early winter of '67, I was deeply immersed in this music, this new music, and really, really enjoying it. It was really plus I was in a new social circle, and that was pretty cool too. And I was in university, so at least I was away from high school. And then January, February of '68, the dead of winter, there was a seminal moment for me. A friend of a friend played me an album that I hadn't heard before by a group that I hadn't heard before called Cream. And that album was Disraeli Gears. And that album, in fact, will be the subject of my first video review, which I'm going to do after this. The reason it was so impactful for me, number one, it sort of introduced me to a more psychedelic blues than what I'd been listening to, which it kind of was more of a psychedelic folk, I guess you could argue. The reason they were called Cream was because these three British musicians were sort of considered the cream of the crop of the current young British musicians, and that was Ginger Baker on drums, Jack Bruce on bass and vocal, and Eric Clapton on guitar. I'm listening to the first song the fellow played me was a song called Tales of Brave Ulysses, which I believe, if I remember correctly, was the first song in side 2, but I could be wrong. Doesn't matter. And he played it because it highlighted or featured a new guitar effects pedal that I hadn't heard before, and he was pointing it out to me, called a wah pedal. And at that moment, I decided that I was going to learn to play guitar. I am full disclosure, a bit of an amateur musician as well, and have been since that time. on and off, I have to admit. Um, Now, this is a big deal for me because in our family there was no one who played music. You know, we enjoyed music, but nobody, there wasn't even on our family radar to be a musician. So for me, it was a big step, uh, and I'll unpack that in another video how that happened. But that was the big change for me, where I went from just being a listener to someone who actually wanted to make his own music. Um, that's about all I'm going to say about this today. You sort of have the setup now. You know where I'm going with this. If you've made it this far, thank you. And I hope we're going to have a little fun together here as we do this. And I hope we'll learn a couple things together. So please join me again if you can. As I say, the music channel is Touchstone Music, and it's because these albums that I'm going to be reviewing are my musical touchstones from the past 50 years or so. So until then, be safe, and I hope I see you again. Thanks very much.